Alright, so what's going on, guys? In the aftermath of chapter 368 of Berserk, I want to talk about something that's been running through my mind for quite some time now. Now, in the community, we've all been talking about whether or not the Behelit or the Behelit that Guts is holding is actually his, or if he's just holding it for someone else. And I believe recent events sort of answer that question. Now, before we get into that, I want to talk about what the Behelit does itself, what we know about it, how it's activated, and what it could do in the future. Now, according to the Berserk fandom page, Behelits, also referred to as prime droplets connecting to the beyond, something we talked about in my previous Berserk video where I was talking about the Sword of Actuation, or the Yobi Mizu no Tsurugi, are highly spiritual stone objects that act as keys that link the deep layer of the astral world to the physical world. It is said that they govern the fate of humanity. They're used primarily for summoning the God Hand, and the Crimson Behelit is unique among the Behelits, appearing only to individuals qualified to be reborn as God Hand members. Now, I talked about how the Behelits summon the God Hand members. Now, you can't just ask for the God Hand to come to you at any moment. You can't ask for the power to be bestowed upon you. Now, it only comes to you when you're at death's door and you're in an emotional state that is erratic, if you will. Now, we saw this with the Count when, he was nearly at death's door, he didn't want to die, and the God Hand gave him the possibility of sacrificing his daughter to gain more strength and possibly kill the Black Swordsman. Now, the Behelit itself is kind of interesting because it always goes back to the original owner and it always finds its way back to your hands in that moment that you need it the most, in that moment that they're going to give you that option of whether or not you want to make a sacrifice for great power. Now, to get the Behelit itself is actually relatively innocuous. For example, Griffith got his Behelit from some old fortune teller. The Count got his from a caravan of merchants. And Ganishka got his from what looks to be Daiba. So to get it is actually just a mere transfer. If someone decides that they want to give it to you, it transfers ownership. And then by having the ownership of the Behelit, it will weave causality and make it so that it will put you in a situation in which you're distressed and that it will force you to want to use it. However, if you decide to steal it from someone else, it does not transfer ownership. But if someone just decides that, hey, I don't want this thing anymore and gives it to you, then it's yours. Now, what's interesting about that is that we saw a fortune teller that was talking to Puck right before the eclipse happened, and she sort of saw that it was going to be this calamitous event and it was going to be very ominous. And I'm guessing that the fortune teller that gave the Behelit to Griffith sort of sensed this ominous power and decided that it was just too risky to hold on to and decided to give it away. Flora, who's a mage, also sensed this ominous power from the Behelit and, told Guts about it. And I'm guessing that Daiba, the one who gave it to Ganishka, also sensed this power because he's a sorcerer and he probably sensed that, wow, this is some really hateful, dark magic. I don't want to be the one holding this so that it weaves destiny in a way where I feel like I need to use this. I need to give this away to someone. Now, Guts, knowing all this, is willingly holding on to the Behelit. He doesn't want to give it up to anyone else, and he even made his intentions known to Flora that I might want to use it in the future to summon them so I can kill them. He didn't say this directly, but that was kind of implied by the words that he said. So to attain the Behelit, it has to be given to you by someone, and it cannot be taken. Now, Guts was given the Behelit by Vargas. Now, Vargas was not the original owner of the Behelit, but the original owner, i.e. the Count, ended up not using it and died. So I would think, because the Behelit doesn't have an owner at that point, and the last person that it was given to was Guts, that would make him the owner by default. Now, the second reason I believe that it's Guts' Behelit is because whenever a Behelit is ready to be activated, the face that is discombobulated starts to resume a normal human face. The eyes, the nose, and the mouth all go back to that normal form. Now, when Guts was in Quithoth and he saw Slan, we saw that Behelit resuming a normal human face. In fact, we see his brand bleeding, and then he says, this feeling, looks down at his satchel, and he sees the Behelit, and it's almost at a normal looking face. The right eye, the nose, and the mouth are where they should be. It's just the left eye that's not where it should be. And then as Slan starts materializing into the troll intestines, we see his brand bleeding even more, and then the face starts to look like it's almost normal. Slan proceeds to lacerate his chest, and he's just bleeding out in absolute pain. And she even mentions that among the many feelings that he's feeling right now, that the most prominent one is fear. And we know from the past experiences of the activation of the Behelit, fear is a catalyst, if you will. The Count feared death. Griffith feared that his dream was gone. Rosine feared that elves and fairies didn't exist. And now Guts is fearing for his own life. And as Slan begins to lick his face and enjoys all this emotional discharge that she's feeling from Guts, we see the Behelit in its proper position, and it's beginning to feel pain. And as we know, prior to the activation, the Behelit starts to feel pain, it opens its eyes, and it starts to scream, and blood pours from its eyes. So this would indicate to me in this moment that Guts is on the urge of activating the Behelit, that he's ready to go, and Slan is the impetus for causing this. And then she even says, why not make a sacrifice as he did? Which is sort of teasing him in a way. It's like she's doing everything possible to sort of direct him in that direction, make him pissed, make him fearful, make him writhe in pain. And then she even asks the question bluntly like, hey, you got that Behelit, why not use it? Why not gain all that power? Why not become a demon? And then maybe you can make all your wishes come to reality. So in my mind's eye, the fact that Guts was given the Behelit by Vargas, the Count is dead, so he's no longer the owner of it, and the fact that the face that was discombobulated resumed its normal position when he was hurt by Slan and fearful of death signifies to me that it's his Behelit. There's no question about it. There's no way it's Casca's, there's no way it's Sonya's. Like, these theories just don't hold any water to me. Like, we've never seen any evidence that that would be the case. And to further prove my point, the fact that Slan was trying to proliferate this fear and rage in Guts and was trying to stimulate him to use the Behelit was teased in the Black Swordsman arc. And I quote, if that boy became one of ours, I'd love it. So Slan already had aspirations of making Guts one of their own, and why not? A man that has fought many apostles and killed them as a mere human would probably be one of the strongest apostles ever created, if not the strongest. He might even rival the God Hand without even being a member of the God Hand. But Conrad says, but he hasn't been ordained by the laws of fate. Now for many this might mean, well, it's not his destiny to use the Behelit. However, you have to keep in mind that the Count was destined to use the Behelit a second time. But because he refused to sacrifice his daughter, Void said, the thread of fate has been severed. So even though there is causality, even though there is a predetermined destination to everything, it doesn't mean that it will go exactly as followed. The God Hand cannot predict everything. They knew the eclipse was going to happen, and they knew that Griffith was going to become Femto, but they didn't know the Skull Knight was going to break into the festival and save Guts and Casca. That was outside of fate. That was outside causality. And this was another instance of that. The Count refusing to sacrifice his daughter was outside of causality, which means that the Behelit that was supposed to be used for him is instead going to be used for someone else. And I believe that someone else is Guts. Now, how would this come about? Guts has had many opportunities in which his fear and his anger has been at a tipping point and has almost pushed him over the edge. So you would think that the Behelit would have been used at this point. But because he is so strong-willed, because he is so resistant to the God Hand, and so focused on killing them and getting revenge on Griffith, I think that's what prevented him from using it in the first place. However, I think there might be a catalyst that might force him into a situation in which he'll feel compelled to use it. Now, to explain that, I have to explain a different situation. And for this, we need to talk about Ganishka's man-made Behelit. Now, this is actually pretty interesting because this was made by Daiba, and he talks about the fact that it took him his whole life to create this man-made Behelit. And what's interesting about this is it sort of mimics the whole apostle process. However, it's a force process that is very crude by comparison. Now, according to the Berserk wiki page, the man-made Behelit, also known as the demon womb, or the reincarnator, is an artifact that took Daiba's entire life to be made. It was created from still living bodies of apostles, patched and chained together into a vat that is filled with amniotic fluid. The man-made Behelit is normally used to create the Daka by submerging a pregnant woman into it so its offspring is infused with the Abyss's evil power. An apostle has within in order to transform into Daka. Now, this is a very fascinating invention by Daiba, and I think the reason he knew how to make it was because he was the one that gave the Behelit to Ganishka in the first place. Being a sorcerer, he probably sensed the evil energies within the Behelit and was able to determine how it worked. And not only how it worked, but he sort of reversed engineered it so that it could be used in the physical realm, which is really fascinating in its own right. Now, because Ganishka was so overwhelmed by Griffith's presence, he went into the man-made Behelit and became Shiva. And by doing so, what I think he actually became was a physical manifestation of the astral realm. Now, this is actually really interesting because Griffith is not only a human, he's a member of the God Hand. So he can at the very least read the flows of causality. He has some sort of idea of what's going to happen in the future. Hence the reason that he can ride the world spiral tree and know how to navigate throughout it. He can see the future. Same thing with Sonia. She's a prophetess. She can see the future. Now, the reason I believe Griffith did not defeat Ganishka at Vrutanis was because he wanted Ganishka to get desperate. He wanted him to go through this process of becoming Shiva and becoming the outward manifestation of the astral realm. Now, why is this? Because I believe Griffith wanted to use the Skull Knight's sword of actuation to slice, manipulate the space around it so that he could slice open the astral realm, the quote-unquote astral realm, and bring about the Age of Fantasia. Griffith knew that the Skull Knight was going to be there and do what he did, and he did nothing about it. He allowed it to happen because he wanted to use that event for his own purposes. Well, I believe that not only did he use the Skull Knight for his own purposes to sort of open up the astral realm and bring about the Age of Fantasia, I believe he's also going to use Guts for his own purposes to stimulate the activation of the Behelit so that he can bring the God Hand to the physical realm. Now, it's important to keep in mind that Griffith is a very manipulative person. He sees people as like chess pieces on a chessboard, and he's the player. He's directing things the way he wants them to go. That's how we saw Guts, that's how we saw Casca, that's how we saw the Band of the Hawk. When Guts left the Band of the Hawk, he lost control of one of his chess pieces, and he couldn't handle that. But with him becoming Femto again, he becomes the chess player again. He can manipulate the pieces the way he wants them to go. He manipulated Ganishka into becoming Shiva so that it could become the outward projection of the astral realm. He manipulated the Skull Knights into using the Sword of Actuation, the Yobimizu no Tsurugi, into creating that fissure in the astral realm so it would bring about Fantasia. And I believe his final purpose is to manipulate Guts into activating that Behelit so that it will bring the God Hand members into the physical realm so that he can finally finish them off. He's maybe going to sacrifice the people of Falconia so that he can bring the God Hand members to the physical realm, and he's probably going to manipulate Guts into using the Behelit because he senses that Guts, with all his rage and fury and power, will be strong enough in defeating them. He knows that he defeated the Sea God due to the fact that he's the Moonlight Boy, and maybe this is the perfect opportunity of eliminating the God-Hand and eliminating the idea of evil so that Griffith will be the one true God god. Griffith has been this manipulator since the very beginning, and it seems like he's manipulating events to the very end. Yes, he's a member of the God Hand, but I think in his core, he believes he's above the God Hand. And I believe in his core, he thinks he's above the idea of evil. He wants to be the one true God. He wants to be the ultimate. He wants to be the savior, the Alpha and the Omega. And so to get Guts to use the Behelit, he has to make him feel absolute dread and sadness and depression and anger and rage, every single emotion he can, and push it to the absolute limit. Hence the reason he stole Casca from him, and hence the reason he might even torture Casca. Now the last thing that I want to mention, since we're talking about the Behelits, is the setting itself. Whenever the Behelit gets activated, we have sort of this tornado, this whirlwind that surrounds everything that's involved in the ceremony, and then it changes the landscape. For example, the Count, it looked like the MC Escher work, Relativity, with all the staircases going in every which direction. Now I believe the reason that it looked like this was because the Count was very confused. He was disoriented. He didn't know which way was up or down. He got betrayed by his wife. His daughter hated him. So he was in a daze. He was in a maze. He didn't know what to do with his life. He didn't know how to act, and so he was marked by all this confusion. Griffith, on the other hand, had a landscape in which human faces had their eyes closed, and they were lining the walls and the floor. And the way that I see it is that he was stepping on all these human faces. He wanted soldiers that were subordinate, that basically closed their eyes to reality and believed in the dream as he believed in it. And so they were servants, if you will. He wanted people that he could manipulate and kept their eyes closed and didn't question his veracity, didn't question his vision for the future. And I believe if Guts were to use the Behelit, it would be marked by fire and rage. It would almost look like the pits of hell itself. And I'm almost imagining like a flaming mass of fire consuming all of Falconia, making it look like the pits of hell itself. So yeah, a lot of speculations about the Behelit, guys. We know a lot of information about it, but at the same time, there's these little bits of information that we're still in the dark about. It's still a very cryptic device that hasn't been explained fully, but tell me what you guys think of the Behelit, guys. Tell me what you think of these theories. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the flip side.